His works. Tabari was one of the most prolific scholars in Islamic history. The sheer volume of what he produced still amazes people today. But understanding his bibliography isn't straightforward. His works were developed over many years through public lectures, and the same book often appears under different titles depending on when and how it was described. Sometimes what seem like different works are actually parts of the same massive project. One reason for the confusion is that Tabari didn't use consistent titles for his own works. He preferred to refer to subject matter rather than formal names. Some books were never finished, and while he was in his 80s, he still had multiple large projects in progress that he used in his teaching but never gave fixed titles. Let me walk you through his major works. The most famous is his Quran commentary, officially titled, The Complete Clarification of the Interpretation of the Verses of the Quran. Most people just call it the Tafsir. During Tabari's lifetime, this was probably considered his greatest achievement. A Christian philosopher named Yahya ibn Adi reportedly copied the entire work twice just to sell it to provincial rulers, which tells you something about its prestige and value. Tabari worked on the Tafsir for many years. By around 883 or 884, a substantial portion was ready for public lectures. Sometime between 896 and 903, the whole thing was complete. Tabari once said that for 3 years before he started writing it, he prayed to God for permission and help with the project. The work was enormous, comprising about 10,000 pages by one estimate, though another source mentions a manuscript of 4,000 pages in Baghdad. Tabari went through the Quran word by word, verse by verse. He explained the legal implications of each passage, identified which verses had been superseded by later ones, clarified difficult passages, and discussed rare words. Whenever commentators disagreed about the meaning or legal significance of a verse, he would present all their views and then state which interpretation he considered correct. What's interesting is that Tabari was selective about his sources. For religious matters, he refused to use traditions from certain scholars he considered unreliable, like Al-Kalbi, Muqaddal ibn Hayyan, and Al-Waqidi. But when it came to pure history, biography, or Arabic stories, he would use them if they had information he needed that couldn't be found elsewhere. This distinction shows his sophisticated approach to source criticism. The famous scholar Ibn Mujahid, who was an expert on Quran recitation, said that nothing like Tabari's book on Quranic readings had ever been written. He also claimed he had never heard anyone recite the Quran in the prayer niche as beautifully as Tabari. Tabari's second monumental work was his history. This was a comprehensive chronicle starting from the creation of the world and continuing down to his own time. We'll talk more about this work later, but it became one of the foundational texts of Islamic historiography. On the legal side, Tabari produced several important works. His book called The Slim Work on the Laws of the Muslim Religion, usually referred to by its Arabic title Latif, represented his own legal school. This wasn't just a summary of other people's opinions. It contained Tabari's own preferred views, carefully argued and presented. A later scholar said that no better textbook on any legal school had ever been produced than Tabari's Latif. The Latif ran to about 2,500 pages and covered 83 separate topics. It included an introductory essay discussing the fundamental principles of jurisprudence, how to handle consensus, traditions that trace back to only one transmitter, traditions with gaps in their chain of transmission, and the question of when later revelations supersede earlier ones. Tabari also wrote a work called The Disagreements of the Scholars in the Major Centers, which surveyed the legal opinions of 8 major jurists, Malik ibn Anas in 2 versions, Al-Awza'i, Sufyan al-Thawri in 2 versions, Al-Shafi'i, Abu Hanifa, Abu Yusuf, Muhammad al-Shaybani, and Abu Thawr. Originally, Tabari planned to include a Mutazilite scholar, but he dropped him when that scholar's followers started expressing poorly informed legal views. This work ran to about 3,000 pages. Tabari once told his student Ibn Kamil that he had written 2 books that were indispensable for any serious jurist, the Ikhtilaf, which was this survey of disagreements, and the Latif with his own positions. Another legal work, a plain and simple exposition of the laws of the Muslim religion, was even more comprehensive. The section on ritual purity alone ran to 1,500 pages because Tabari included all the disagreements among the companions of the Prophet, their followers, and later scholars, along with his reasoning for his own conclusions. About 2,000 pages of this work were made public through lectures, but parts of it remained unfinished when Tabari died. The minister Al-Abbas ibn al-Hasan once asked Tabari to write an abridged version of one of his legal works for easier study. Tabari produced the light work on the laws of the Muslim religion, which condensed the material into about 400 pages. When the minister sent him 1,000 gold dinars as payment, Tabari refused, saying the minister knew better how to use his money and whom to give charity to. Tabari also wrote on spiritual ethics. His book, The Proper Ways of Spiritual Behavior, organized a person's religious duties according to different parts of the body, the heart, the tongue, the eyes, the ears, and so on. It drew on traditions from the Prophet, the companions, and the followers, as well as discussions of Sufis and pious men. About 500 pages were made public through lectures, with 4 additional parts remaining unpublished at his death. Tabari once said that if this book were completed and made public, it would be a beauty. One politically sensitive project involved compiling the virtues of the first 4 caliphs. Tabari got drawn into a controversy when he learned that another scholar had spoken critically about a tradition associated with the succession question. The tradition in question, known as God or Come, was important to Shia Muslims. Tabari wrote a defense of the tradition's authenticity, which pleased some people but made others uncomfortable. A later Sunni scholar complained that Tabari's work on the subject was a mixed bag of valuable and worthless, sound and unsound information. On Quranic readings, Tabari wrote a detailed work cataloging the differences among Quran readers in different cities, Medina, Mecca, Kufa, Basra, Syria, and elsewhere. For each variant reading, he would explain the interpretation, present the views of different readers, and state his own preference with clear reasoning. Tabari himself had originally followed one particular style of recitation but later developed his own approach. There's also a curious story associated with Tabari's name called The Story of the Lost Belt. According to this tale, when Tabari was about 16 and in Mecca, he witnessed an incident involving a man from Khorasan who had lost a belt containing 1,000 gold dinars. The money was supposed to be given to the most worthy person the man encountered on pilgrimage. An old man found the belt and returned it despite being offered rewards. Impressed by this virtue, the Khorasani gave him the entire sum. The old man divided it among his household, including young Tabari, who received 100 dinars. Tabari supposedly lived on this money for years, using it to fund his studies. Later scholars like Al-Dahabi and Ibn Hajar thought this story was invented, pointing out that the person who transmitted it was considered unreliable. The story has some Shia overtones that might suggest it was propaganda directed against Tabari by his Hanbalite opponents. Or it might preserve genuine biographical information about early visits to Mecca that isn't recorded elsewhere. We can't be sure either way. What stands out about Tabari's entire body of work is its comprehensiveness, its critical approach to sources, and its commitment to independent reasoning. He didn't just transmit what earlier scholars had said. He evaluated, compared, and judged, always willing to state his own conclusions. His works were developed gradually through years of public lectures, allowing for revision and expansion. And the different works were interconnected, with principles established in one book being applied throughout his other writings. The scale of his output is almost incomprehensible. Individual works ran to thousands of pages. To produce this while also teaching daily, maintaining his research, and engaging with the scholarly community of Baghdad required extraordinary discipline and intellectual capacity. It also required the institutional support of students and copyists who enabled this massive literary legacy to survive. Tabari told his students to devote serious study to his works on jurisprudence in particular. He believed he had created something of lasting value. 1,000 years later, scholars still agree with him.